My mother-in-law told my husband, "If you want to inherit my $70 million, you need to divorce this worthless woman now." I warned him he'd regret it. In his rage, he grabbed my hair and punched me in the head. I fell to the floor and my pregnant belly hit the ground hard. But what happened next was even more shocking. Some moments in life leave wounds so deep that no amount of time can heal them. That night was one of those moments. The man who once swore to love and protect me had already shattered my trust, turning my life into a waking nightmare. But betrayal alone wasn't enough for him. He wanted to break me completely. Without warning, he grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked it so hard that a cry of pain escaped my lips. Before I could react, his hand struck my face with such force that I collapsed onto the floor. My pregnant body hit the ground with a painful thud, the impact sending a sharp ache through me. But what happened next was something I could never have imagined. My name is Mia Dawson, and I am 28 years old. If someone had told me a few years ago that my life would turn into a nightmare before transforming into something I never dreamed possible, I would have laughed in disbelief. But life has a way of revealing harsh truths in the most brutal ways. Once, I was a woman who believed in love, in promises, and in forever. I thought marriage was built on trust and devotion, but I was wrong, so terribly, painfully wrong. I met Ethan Hayes when I was 23 in a city I had always dreamed of building my future in, ever would. At that time, I was just an ordinary fashion designer working at a small boutique, hoping that one day, I could launch my own brand. Ethan, on the other hand, was nothing like me. He was wealthy, confident, and dangerously charming. From the moment he stepped into that boutique, flashing that irresistible smile, I felt drawn to him like a moth to a flame. "Are you the one who designed this?" he had asked, holding up a sleek black dress. I nodded shyly. "Yes, I did." A smirk played on his lips. "It's stunning," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Just like you." And just like that, I was swept off my feet. For months, he showered me with attention, treating me to expensive dinners and whispering sweet promises about our future. He made me feel special, chosen, loved. So when he proposed, I didn't even hesitate. I said yes, convinced that I had found the man of my dreams. But dreams can turn into nightmares faster than you realize. The first time I met Victoria Hayes, Ethan's mother, I understood that I would never truly belong in their world. Victoria was the head of Hayes Global Enterprises, a powerful luxury real estate empire, and she made it clear that I was beneath them. At a grand party hosted at the Hayes Mansion, I walked in wearing the best dress I could afford, determined to make a good impression. But the moment Victoria laid eyes on me, she scanned me from head to toe with a look of thinly veiled disdain, as if I was an unwanted stain in her perfect world. "So you're the designer my son has been so fascinated with," she said, swirling her wineglass with a fake smile. "How unexpected." Ethan squeezed my hand reassuringly, but deep down, I knew I was not welcome. And from that night forward, everything started to change. The man who once adored me began to pull away. Ethan spent more time at work, more time at his mother's estate, and less time with me. By the time I was 7 months pregnant, our apartment was filled with silence and tension. The man who used to hold me close at night now barely even looked at me. And then, on one fateful night, my world shattered completely. I still remember that night like a scar burned into my soul. The apartment was eerily quiet, too quiet. I sat on the couch, gently rubbing my swollen belly, trying to ignore the dull ache in my back. I should have been happy, excited to welcome my twins into the world. But instead, an uneasy feeling gnawed at me, telling me something was terribly wrong. Ethan had been distant for weeks, barely speaking to me, coming home late, and when he did, he smelled of expensive cologne, one that wasn't his own. My heart refused to accept what my instincts already knew. Then it happened. Ethan walked into the apartment, his face void of emotion and his eyes cold and distant. He didn't greet me. He didn't even look at me properly. He just stood there in the doorway, his hands clenched into fists as if bracing himself for something unpleasant. "I can't do this anymore, Mia," he said, his voice flat. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean?" I asked, barely managing a whisper. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. "I mean, I'm done. With you. With this. With everything." His words cut through me like a blade. "You're leaving me?" My voice cracked, my hands instinctively cradling my belly. Ethan finally met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw the truth. The man I had loved was gone. "My mother was right," he said coldly. "You don't belong in my world." I should have listened to her from the beginning. It felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. A protective instinct surged within me as I placed my hand over my belly. "Ethan, please," I pleaded. "We're about to have children together. This isn't just about us anymore." He let out a bitter laugh. "That's exactly the problem. I never wanted this, Mia." I don't want you, and I sure as hell don't want to be a father. The room spun. My body felt weak, but I refused to break. So, this is what it's about, I whispered, my voice barely holding together. You're choosing money over us? Your mother's approval over your own children. Ethan's face twisted with frustration. You don't get it. If I stay with you losing everything, the money, the business, the future I had planned, it all felt like a cruel joke. And for what? A life I never even wanted. My vision blurred with tears as I stared at the man standing in front of me. He wasn't the person I had fallen in love with. No. Ethan Hayes had become a stranger, a coward who chose greed over love. I should have stayed silent, should have let him walk away without another word, but the pain inside me twisted into rage. You're a pathetic excuse for a man, I spat, my voice trembling with fury. You're nothing without your mother's money, without me, and one day, you'll realize you lost the only people who truly mattered. That was when it happened. Ethan's jaw clenched, his eyes darkened, and before I could brace myself, his hand shot out, delivering a sharp, brutal slap across my face. A gasp left my lips as pain exploded through me, my head snapping to the side. My vision blurred with shock and tears, but before I could react, he grabbed a fistful of my hair, yanking it hard enough to make me cry out. You don't get to talk to me like that, he snarled, his face inches from mine. You're nothing without me, Mia, nothing. I winced, my scalp burning, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might shatter my ribs. My body trembled, but not out of fear, out of fury. I locked eyes with him, refusing to break. No, Ethan, I said, my voice chillingly calm despite the tears spilling down my face. I am everything without you, and one day, you'll beg for my forgiveness. He scoffed, shoving me away as if I were worthless. Don't count on it. And just like that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone, pregnant, broken, abandoned. I pressed my hand to my burning cheek, breathing heavily, shaking from everything that had just happened. But something inside me shifted in that moment. I knew, without a doubt, that I would never let Ethan or his mother win. One day, I would rise from the ashes, and when that day came, I would take everything from him, just like he had taken everything from me. The night Ethan walked out of my life, it felt like a part of me had died. For hours, I sat on the cold floor, my fingers still pressed to my stinging cheek. My hair tangled from where he had yanked it. I was shaking, not just from pain, but from humiliation, heartbreak, and rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to cry until there were no tears left. But then, a small movement in my belly reminded me, I wasn't alone. My babies were still inside me, still depending on me. And in that moment, realization hit me like a wave of fire. Ethan had left me thinking I would crumble. He had chosen his mother's wealth over our family, convinced that without his money, his name, his power, I would be nothing. But he was wrong. I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to rise. The next few months were the hardest of my life. With no financial support, no husband, and no family to turn to, I was completely on my own. Victoria Hayes made sure of that. She pulled every string she could to get me evicted from the apartment Ethan and I had shared. She froze all our joint accounts, making sure I couldn't withdraw a single dollar. 7 months pregnant, homeless, and completely alone, I had nothing. I knocked on doors, begged for help, but no one wanted to get involved. The Hayes family had too much power, too much influence. If anyone helped me, they risked losing everything. I'm sorry, Mia, but I can't risk my business for this. I wish I could help, but I can't afford to lose my job. Maybe you should just go back and beg Ethan. He is the father after all. I refused. I would rather starve on the streets than crawl back to the man who had destroyed me. So I did what I had to do. I took whatever jobs I could find, cleaning shifts at motels, working as a night shift waitress in a rundown diner, stitching clothes for a local tailor. My feet swelled, my back ached, but I didn't stop. I barely slept, barely ate, but every single dollar I earned, I saved. Because I knew that one day, I would need it. When the time finally came, I gave birth in a cheap, overcrowded hospital alone. No husband to hold my hand. No family waiting outside. Just me. It was the most excruciating pain I had ever felt. But the moment I heard their first cries, a boy and a girl, everything else disappeared. I held them close, breathing in their warmth. They were so small, so fragile. I will never let anyone hurt you, I whispered, my tears slipping onto their tiny faces. I named them Caleb and Ella, names that belonged to no one but them. No connection to Ethan. No part of his legacy. I refused to put his name on their birth certificates. As far as I was concerned, he was already dead to us. But deep down, I knew the truth. One day, he would regret everything. One day, he would realize he had walked away from the only thing that ever truly mattered. But by then, it would be too late. I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to win. Ethan and Victoria thought they had destroyed me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. I would become more successful than Ethan ever imagined. I would build something greater than his family's empire. And when the time was right, I would take everything from him. But I knew I couldn't do it overnight. I needed time. I needed a plan. And then it hit me. I already had one. There was one thing Ethan's family had never taken seriously: fashion. I had spent years designing dresses, working in boutiques, dreaming of having my own label. But I had always been too scared to chase that dream. Not anymore. If people wouldn't give me a chance, I would take it myself. At night, when the twins were asleep, I sketched. I cut fabric. I stitched by hand. I poured every ounce of my pain, my anger, my determination into my work. Then one day, an idea struck me. A high-profile charity gala was coming up, one hosted by some of the richest families in the city, including the Hayes family. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just going to attend that gala. I was going to make sure every single person there remembered my name, and that night would be the first step toward my revenge. I had nothing, no status, no connections, no invitations. But I had talent, and I had a plan. The Hayes family was hosting one of the most prestigious charity galas of the year. It was an event where the rich and powerful flaunted their wealth, dressed in designer gowns, sipping overpriced champagne, and pretending to care about charity. Victoria Hayes would be there. Ethan would be there. And so would I, not as a guest, but as a storm waiting to strike. I spent every waking moment designing, sewing, and perfecting the dress that would change my fate, a dress so breathtaking, so unique, that no one would dare ignore me. It was deep crimson, a color that screamed confidence and danger. The fabric hugged the body like a second skin, cascading in layers so smooth it looked like liquid fire. The open back design revealed just enough to be bold yet elegant, while a delicate silver thread wove across the fabric like lightning streaking through a stormy sky. "If they won't give me a seat at their table," I muttered, running my fingers over the final stitches, "then I'll burn the whole damn table down." The night of the gala, I arrived without an invitation. No one noticed me at first, just another woman stepping out of a cab, my heels clicking against the marble pavement as I ascended the grand staircase. But then they saw the dress. The moment I stepped inside, heads turned. Women gasped. Men stared. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Who is she? That dress, that's stunning. I've never seen anything like it before." I walked with purpose, my chin held high, pretending I belonged there because tonight, I did. Then, my eyes locked onto Victoria and Ethan Hayes. They stood at the center of the room, surrounded by their elite circle. Victoria, as always, looked composed, sipping her wine like a queen overseeing her kingdom. Ethan stood beside her, polished and powerful as ever. But when his gaze met mine, he froze. For the first time since he had left me broken and pregnant, Ethan Hayes looked at me and saw something he never expected. I wasn't the helpless woman he had abandoned. I was fire. I was power. I was his biggest mistake. His mouth parted slightly, shock flickering in his eyes. I smiled. A slow, knowing smile. He took a step forward, as if needing to confirm I was real. "Mia." His voice was barely above a whisper. Victoria followed his gaze, her usual arrogance shifting into something unreadable. Her sharp eyes studied me, narrowing, as if piecing together a puzzle she hadn't realized was missing. "You shouldn't be here," Victoria finally said, her voice as sharp as glass. I lifted a champagne flute from a passing waiter's tray, taking a slow sip, savoring the moment. "Oh, but I should," I replied smoothly. "You see, Victoria, I belong here more than you know." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're nobody." I laughed softly. "Not for long." And that was the truth. Because tonight wasn't about revenge, yet. Tonight was about making sure the world knew my name. Before Victoria or Ethan could say another word, a woman approached me. A socialite, one with deep connections in the fashion industry. "Darling, that dress is exquisite. Who designed it?" I smiled. "I did." She gasped. "You're a designer? Do you have a label?" "Not yet," I said, taking another sip of champagne. "But I will soon." And just like that, the first step of my plan was in motion. Victoria and Ethan could only watch as I was pulled into conversation after conversation, as people begged to know where they could buy my designs. That night, I left the gala with more than just attention. I left with my first real opportunity. And as I passed Ethan one last time, I leaned in just enough to whisper, "This is only the beginning." Then, without looking back, I disappeared into the night, leaving him standing there, watching me go, just as he had once done to me. Only this time, I was the one holding all the power. The night of the gala had changed everything. I wasn't just the ex-wife Ethan abandoned anymore. I was a name people wanted to know. By the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Designers, journalists, and socialites were all asking the same question. Who is Mia Dawson? And I made sure they got their answer. With the money I had saved from endless shifts and the contacts I made at the gala, I took my biggest risk yet. I launched my own fashion brand, Dawson Noir. It started as a small online boutique featuring a handful of exclusive, handcrafted designs, each dress carrying the same bold, striking elegance as the one I had worn that night. A dress should not just be worn, it should make the wearer unforgettable. That was my motto. And within just 6 months, Dawson Noir went viral. Hollywood stylists started reaching out. Models wanted to wear my pieces. Luxury magazines began featuring my work. Suddenly, I was no longer just a fashion designer. I was a force to be reckoned with. I was a threat. While I was rising, Ethan was falling. Hayes Global Enterprises, once an untouchable empire, was bleeding money. Bad investments, a failing economy, and worst of all, Victoria's iron-fisted control were suffocating the company. I kept my eye on the news, watching as Ethan and his mother struggled to keep their business afloat. Hayes Global is facing severe financial losses. Investors are pulling out due to poor management. The once mighty real estate empire is now on the brink of collapse. Every headline made me smile. But I wasn't done yet. I didn't just want to watch Ethan suffer. I wanted to be the reason he lost everything. So I made my move. Through silent investors, people who believed in my vision, I began acquiring shares in Hayes Global. Little by little, I gained control, ensuring my name never appeared in the records. And then the day came when I owned the majority of the shares. That's when I received the official invitation to the Hayes Global board meeting. The very company that had thrown me away was now in my hands, and it was time for Ethan and Victoria to find out the hard way. I arrived at Hayes Global's headquarters dressed in a black power suit, my heels clicking against the marble floors. Executives, shareholders, and board members filled the massive conference room, murmuring about the company's downfall. At the head of the table sat Victoria, her usual cold confidence beginning to crack. Beside her was Ethan, the man who once thought I was beneath him. But today, I was above them all. I stepped into the room, and every eye turned toward me. Then I placed a folder on the table. As of today, I own the majority shares in Hayes Global Enterprises. Silence. Ethan's face went pale. Victoria's lips parted slightly in disbelief. No. This is a mistake, she muttered, flipping through the documents with shaking hands. This is impossible. I leaned in slightly, my voice calm but sharp. The mistake was underestimating me, Victoria. Ethan finally spoke, his voice strained. Mia, you did all of this? I met his gaze, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing for him. No pain, no regret, no love. Only satisfaction. I built something from nothing, Ethan. While you were busy protecting your mother's empire, I was creating my own. His hands clenched into fists. You can't do this. I smirked. I already did. Then, I delivered the final blow. As the new majority shareholder, my first official act is to remove both you and Victoria from your positions. Ethan shot up from his chair, rage flashing in his eyes. You can't just. My palm connected with his cheek so hard that the sound echoed in the silent boardroom. Ethan staggered back, his face burning red from both the impact and the humiliation. Before he could recover, I grabbed his collar, yanked him closer, and whispered so only he could hear, "This is for the night you hit me, for the night you pulled my hair and left me to suffer alone." I let him go, watching as he struggled to process what had just happened. Then, I turned to Victoria. She looked at me with pure hatred, but there was something else in her eyes to fear because she knew I had taken everything from them, and there was nothing they could do to stop me. Without another word, I turned on my heel and walked out of the boardroom, leaving Ethan and Victoria in the ruins of the empire they had once ruled. That night, when I arrived home, Caleb and Ella ran into my arms. "Mommy, did you win?" Ella asked, looking up at me with bright, innocent eyes. I smiled, brushing her soft curls back. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "I won. Because revenge wasn't about ruining Ethan's life. It was about building one so powerful, so successful, that he no longer had the ability to define me. I had risen, and I had done it without him.